Hello world and true believers. This is Brenda, a lost Aspie girl, and I know I already made a video today, but someone made a comment on the video that I made the other day about my other theory of mind quiz video and how I mix up my pronouns, and I thought that making a video on cluttering would be kind of significant because although I mentioned my cluttering, I haven't really discussed it, what that means. And because, being on the spectrum means a lot of things. I like to say the people that aren't on the spectrum, I call them neurosocial. And the reason I chose to call them this is because when you're influenced socially, it does a bunch of things. It influences speech and how you communicate and all kinds of stuff. Not just how you communicate with everybody else, but how you interpret the information that is being communicated to you. Hence the literal brain. We take things literally because that's how we hear things. But like when I went for myself, because it manifests, there's always slight variations. That's why they like to say neurodiversity, and people's diagnosis and what they struggle with. And for me, when I went into for my assessment, I got executive functioning problems. I got auditory processing problems, and part of it, and part of that manifests, and mind blindness. Part of that manifests for me in my speech, and first of all, on how I hear things. So the auditory processing is not that I hear things improperly. It's just that if there's because I'm literal, because I think in patterns and pictures. If more than one person is talking at one time, my ability to absorb that information becomes compromised. Because this goes into the thinking where I'm saying where I think our thinking isn't defective, it's just different. Because I mentioned in a video before, I mentioned a couple minutes before, but how, first of all, people a lot of times say people with ASD have problems with abstractions or with big picture thinking, and I say that both of these are erroneous. It's just how we come to those conclusions, or to those types, to an abstraction or to big picture thinking. Okay, so the social brain, when it comes to big picture thinking, they see the big picture first, and then they look at the details. We do it the other way around. And because we look at the details first, and we need all that, that's why, like, I think we always say you think in puzzles and things of that, because we have to look at all at the details first. We tend to look at things in more depth. So that's why I mentioned before, I didn't use this exact terminology. Actually, kind of cluttered when I was trying to explain myself. Is that our breadth of knowledge sometimes isn't, especially at a younger age, isn't as wide as a lot of other people. But the depth of the knowledge, or the expertise and the knowledge of the things that we do know, is pretty deep. Because when we decide to learn something, we become obsessive about it. We need to learn everything about that thing, everything related. And as we get older, depending on who we are and where we are on the spectrum and stuff like that, and I know this happened for me, is our obsessions begin to branch out, and we never stop loving to learn and wanting to know more. But the way we learn, and especially for me, is not usually through other people. It's through learning on our own. So what we read, or we watch TV, or whatever means, learning on computer, whatever means, whatever that we choose to learn about something, that's what we do. But we don't learn through other people. A lot of other people learn, most people, the neurosocial brain learns through osmosis. Just being in an environment, they soak it in. And they learn through heuristics. So their environment itself, like when people are talking, they're taking shortcuts. Their brain has learned shortcuts to learn all that, learn what they need to learn as quickly as they do. We don't learn that way. I know that. That's why she said I have auditory processing problems. So, like, it caused me problems when I would have meetings at work. I was supposed to run them, and there would be multiple people talking at the same time, and that's when part of my cluttering comes in. It actually will turn into what is called involuntary mutism, where, like, I'll lose all my words. I won't be able to comprehend what's going on enough to actually have anything to say back, or I'll get so overwhelmed by what's saying that I won't have any words. Sometimes I'll actually have the words in my head, but I won't be able to sequence them. I'm going to get into more in that in a second. But So when it comes to understanding something, like we might not be able to see the full forest first, but that's because we like to map things out. So we'll go in there and we're going to learn each tree intimately, or each puzzle piece intimately. But by the end, when we have all of that, when it's because it's branched out and we've learned everything, and we can step back, we see the whole forest. But not only do we see the whole forest, but we know each tree intimately. And I think the neurosocial brain does this in the opposite way. They go in and they can see the full picture at first, and then they pick and choose which ones they want to learn more in depth. But when if you probe them, when if for their knowledge base, they don't actually know everything about every single tree that's in that forest, not in depth, not the depth that we like to do, to the extent that we like to do. And the part of the reason we do this is because we don't have the same filters that you guys have. When I say you guys, I mean neurosocials, because I want to clarify for that person who got upset with my pronoun. So for the neurosocials out there, we don't have the same filters you are. So Ian Ford gets into this in the Field Guide to Understanding Earthlings. He talks about there's this whole play that he has going on inside of it, and inside the book, to kind of explain the social interactions of people. And they're in the street and they're talking, and they're able to absorb they're not getting overwhelmed. They're able to absorb everything that go on and still understand each other. And I immediately understood why he was doing this, because I know this happens to me. If I'm in a public place or in a social situation, there's too much going on, sometimes I shut down inside, because there's no filter in my brain to filter out all the extraneous information, especially from people talking, or even things going on. If there's a lot of music, a lot of different things, I need to focus on one thing at a time to absorb the information. But when I do absorb that information, I absorb it fully. And that's how I'm absorbing the information. Now, this goes into the whole cluttering thing, because when I then try to convey that information, because I think in patterns and pictures, and because, which is why I have such a hard time when people are just talking and have auditory processing problems, is that all my thoughts flood into my head at once. It's like a big pattern that's happening in my head simultaneously. They're not sequenced linearly. They're all in this weird pattern that only I can interpret. And then what I have to do in real time is translate it into words. That's why I'm so much more articulate via the written word than I am through speech, because in the written word I have time to sequence everything, to look back to see if I left out words and everything like that. So when I had my ASD diagnosis, she sat me down, she explained their executive functioning, auditory processing, mind blindness, and everything like that. And I asked her, and she mentioned the cluttering, and she said I had slightly prosodic and pedantic speech. And I asked her why, and and some of the stuff I just explained to you now, like that, all my thoughts occur simultaneously, and they're in pictures. A lot of times they're patterns in pictures, and I have to translate them. Most people don't have to do that, and it works the other way around. So when other people are talking, and this is where I'm talking about by filters, other people are talking, especially the more, I'm trying to translate all of that into the pictures and the patterns in my head. I'm trying to make all those connections. And the social brain doesn't have to do that. They have these filters, these heuristics, these shortcuts. I mean, and Ian Ford talks about this in his book, that they're able to take. They learn at a young age, and they're able to kind of immediately categorize everything off immediately. My brain doesn't do that. I tend to take things in, almost overwhelmed by it. But the thing is I'm able to do is later on, I'll take whatever happened and be able to turn it over in my head, and look at it, and I'll rotate it almost like a pit, like an object, like a conversation, and look at it from different angles and see different things that I didn't see before. And that's why I was saying that I think it would be interesting that if you have kids take it, and I don't think because they don't have as much experience or much things, and I don't think they're looking at any perspective at all. I just think they're looking at the evidence from that theory of mind quiz. When I said ask an adult, and the reason I was saying that, because I think people with ASD, we tend to take all the stuff that we've learned, we don't dismiss any of it. It's all right there. And when any kind of scenario comes up, anything that seems relevant to our head immediately comes to the forefront, and we start to make connections. And so that's why when I was looking at that quiz, and and I saw it was two little girls in that room, I immediately thought of my sister, my relationship with my sister, because that's something that happened to me before. And I think that a lot of people that are on the spectrum, they have a tendency, the way they relate to the rest of the world is the way they relate to them ourselves. So when someone else is telling us something, or when we're dealing with something like that, we look for a situation in our own lives that we can relate it to, and we try to see if there's similarities, and we look for connections. If there's something in our own lives that have happened, we look at anecdotal levels or stories that we've heard from our friends or that we've read in books or seen on movies, to see if there's connections there. And I know for myself, because one of the things that gets me in trouble in life, but actually is also an aid, is I read a lot and I watch lots of movies, and I tend to watch things on repeat. And and I remember quotes. I tend to remember, like, the things I read, I tend to remember pretty much verbatim. And things I watch, because I usually, and that's usually because I watch movies so many times, I can quote almost any line. And I have a tendency to modify those lines in real life. And a lot of conversations I have, and it's always, no one ever even notices I'm doing it, are me modifying lines from movies to fit the situations. If I can't think of something I need to say, I think of a movie and a quote from a line. It gets me in trouble one time. Sometimes, like one time not that long ago, someone called me crazy, and I was like, maybe I am crazy. I would know it if I were. I'm not like you, but I'm not like you intended to be. So I don't know if you'll be able to trust me. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And if anybody can know what quote from what movie I modified that, you get triple points. So because I know I clutter, and I'm less likely to clutter if I actually do things like that, it helps me in social situations. When someone says something to me, instead of saying whatever, I just think of a line that's like it would be fitting, and and I'll just modify it and use it. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people will realize it. Sometimes I'll even tell them that I got a quote from a movie, and they'll say, real life is a movies, Brenda. And I'm like, yeah, but movies make more sense than you guys do. So sometimes, not always, but I mean, because there's so many shortcuts. There's a new word that everybody's saying right now, and I someone says to me, they're like, you're killing it, and I was like, what the fuck? And I think I think I know it. I think it means that I think it's a good thing. I don't think they literally mean that I'm killing something. I think they think I'm like doing something so well. I'm not sure, but I think that's what it is. I think it's a positive thing. But you gotta keep up on that shit. And so, because there's always new weird sayings that are going around that people just assume that you'll know. So, I don't know if that helped you guys with cluttering. So cluttering basically is just you're tripping over yourself because our minds don't process information the way. When I say our minds, I'm talking about people on the spectrum. Minds don't process information the way the neurosocial brain does. So our ability to communicate that sometimes is compromised. I don't think that we have as much problems with each other, because I think that we're more likely to ask each other to clarify. Or, you know what I mean? I think if it was just a world of just us, the same rules wouldn't apply and things wouldn't be as difficult. But we live in this world and we learn to adapt. And so hopefully it's helpful. Thanks, guys. Bye.